Hi, my name is Shane, and today we are reviewing Iron Lung. Now, if I was to simplify and truncate my thoughts on this film down to just an expression, it would probably be...
it's alright,
Now, let's dive into it a little bit, and for this review, it will be a spoiler review. There will be spoilers for both the film and probably the game itself. So consider yourself warned, and from here on out, here we go. So, I watched this film the other day, and I went into it with really mid expectations. Not because I didn't think that it had the potential to be good, but after watching Return to Silent Hill very recently, it was a reminder of what happens to a lot of game franchises that become films. Games on TV have been doing all right, but films, we have not cracked it yet. So I went into this kind of with lowered expectations, which I guess if we're putting the bar there, those expectations were met. Now, this is not to criticize Markiplier or Markiplier's acting or anything like that. I think the fact that this individual was so passionate to go and make a film about a game that he loved, that is inspiring. And especially outside of the Hollywood fold, that is something to strive to do. The problem here isn't even that I think Markiplier wasn't a good actor in this. I think what happened here is, for a first film that I honestly consider quite ambitious in terms of a scope for indie film, he took on writing, he took on directing, and he took on the lead acting role. I think for that purpose, he spread himself a little thin. And it also makes it more difficult, I think. And I'm assuming in some scenarios I could be wrong. But I do think that when you do all of that for a film, it is much harder, excuse me, to go into that film and into the editing room and start hacking away at it. Because I'm sure there was a ton of footage that was removed from this film, but it is 2 hours. It is a 2-hour film in which a character is just in one environment. So let's set this all up. Iron Lung is based on a game that specifically takes place in a submersible called an Iron Lung. Now, there is no windows on this well, there's one tiny kind of port view that's covered, but otherwise, the only way to view outside of the Iron Lung is by what essentially amounts to a Polaroid camera. Now, in the game, because the player gets to interact with all the environment, it really works. Like, you can have it in a singular location, and because there are interactive elements with it, it's enjoyable. When you do that within a film, it gets a little boring, specifically because there are so many prolonged areas that work really well in the game. I'm thinking of... so the first 40 minutes of the film deal with kind of the setup, like him in the submersible, him going down, doing a little bit of reconnaissance, and then coming back up after something happens, which is a minor potential attack on the ship. But then he goes back up, and there's a little bit of interaction with the people who have essentially sent this prisoner, Simon, down in this submersible to either die or earn his freedom. Now, I understand from a film perspective, you want to give a little bit of background on the character, but I didn't particularly enjoy some of the flashback scenes. There's some flashbacks that are just kind of peppered in here to show the setup for Simon being in this specific circumstance, but they're just kind of blown by. They're quick. Honestly, it's somewhat disorienting in terms of just like, oh, here's this, blah, 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 and now hopping back down. And you didn't really need it. And this is where I said the editing here could have really taken over, because even the beginning, it starts off with a prolonged narration of what, like, the quiet rapture, not necessarily what it is, but like what has kind of transpired. And I don't feel like it was necessary. I feel like it would have been cooler to just drop into the submersible, and while there's condensation happening and there's leaks, the blood is trickling down into it, which happens in the film. That, to me, without any context, is much more interesting than kind of spelling it out. And also the narration just kind of felt a little hokey. But for the first 40 minutes of the film, there is a decent amount setting up the initial premise of the story. Now, some of it, again, I do think that I'm trying to say this in the nicest way possible. So I'm going to circle back. Markiplier is not a bad actor. However, when you don't have a director on the other side of the camera, like, granted, when you shoot a footage, you can go back and rewatch it and then come back to the scene. But having an external view to kind of, one, monitor your performance and kind of get an idea of what you're delivering, and then two, to bring the rest of that performance out of you, I think would have really benefited Markiplier. Because, I don't think he's bad, but I do think that there are certain instances where he kind of leaps between, like, kind of pathetic and, like, feeble to all of a sudden really rage-filled. Like, there's a scene where Troy Baker and him are just having a quick back and forth, and then he just at some point says "fuck you" to him, and then it turns into, like, a hostile environment. And I'm like, I mean, I get it in terms of, like, everything that's happening, but this guy was being moderately nice to you, and there wasn't even really anything there that planted the seeds of, like, he's being disingenuous. There's that later, but right here I didn't really feel it. So, like, the "fuck you" and all of this seemed a bit out of the blue. And then again, like, there's instances of him screaming and getting mad at people. There's an accident that happens early in the film, which obviously isn't in the game, but he irradiates some people that are in a room when he's getting the sub worked on, which already makes them hate him because they've caused them radiation poisoning. So it doesn't make you really feel that connected to Simon here, because you're like, maybe, like, I get they didn't tell you any of these things, but maybe you shouldn't be playing around with shit. Anyways, so yeah, first 40 minutes, there's a little bit of the setup, bringing them down, bringing them back up, see the blood on the side, sending them back down, and then he's supposed to ram the skeleton of this creature to collect a sample. At which point, everything goes haywire and he gets attacked, and he gets knocked out, and he loses contact with the outside world. So those first 40 minutes, a little bit hokey, but the setup was fine. But then we get another half hour or so of, like, scenes that to me just lacked tension. And what I mean by that is there is a scene where Simon crawls into, I don't even remember what it was called, but just in this section to fix the iron lung. And in most films, this would be like, oh, something's going to happen, like that. But because he's in there alone and nothing can really happen, he just kind of crawls in there, does something, crawls back, and it's business as usual. And then for a good, I'd say 30 minutes, you get the elements from the game where you're essentially mapping out this ocean of blood. And in the game, that's fine. But for how long this goes on, it does become very tedious. Like, it's just a long gap of taking photos, looking at things on the floor, going, And I feel like a bunch of this could have been cut. Like, there only needed to be a couple of photos, couple of it, show the map every now and again, and then, he's mapped this entire lake. That, like, I don't need to go through the whole process with him, but to see the finished map and go like, oh, he's been at this for a while, that to me is fine. Then the movie does some stuff that I think is really interesting. And I wish there was more of this, where it becomes almost like a Lovecraftian horror, where it kind of goes between, is he hallucinating or what is happening? And he sees, like, he's covered in blood, and he sees this ginormous eye in the sky saying his name, communicating with him, communing with him. He has a voice that's on the radio telling him that he's got to find this light and meet with them. Like, it's really surreal and really cool. And this element of the film I really liked. I was just like, yeah, sign me up for that. But the problem is getting there, and then for how long we stay there, is the problem. I think this Iron Lung works as a great element for cabin fever, and like, it almost opens up the imagination of, like, he can see all of this, and like, you don't necessarily have to be confined to this one location because he's hallucinating. And they have a brief moment of that, and I thought it was cool. And then they cut back to the clunkiness, where, now he's connected back to the people, that are observing him. I can't remember, like the space station or something, excuse me. And for this, it kind of goes back to a little bit of that tedium of, like, them going back and forth of, we're going to leave you to die, blah, 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 blah. Like, all this stuff that we already know, he knows, but they want to have this back and forth soppy thing with this character you've seen once. And then he says something of interest about him finding another submersible down there, and his sub his Iron Lung trying to actually connect to it and get the data from it, to give more information about what is down there and what they've scouted. And this piques their interest to the point that they're like, go get the data and we'll save you. And I'm sitting there, I'm just like, yeah, sure. But then, again, from here, once we get to that spot, it goes back to the things I found really cool, where he's hearing the voice on the radio communicate while this girl is, like, freaking out and panicking, and she's saying, I can't rescue you, all this stuff. But he is being very dense to some degree, and it's just like, you said you'd save me. But it's clear in the call that she is panicking and, like, stressed and just saying, like, listen to me, fucking listen. And he's just like, but you said you'd save me. And it's just like, buddy, give her a minute. Just give her 2 seconds to explain this. But regardless, while she's, Ava, I believe the girl's name is trying to communicate with him, that other voice, that surreal voice that he had heard before, starts communicating and saying, you have to destroy that data because we can't let anybody know what's happening down here. And it's this Lovecraftian voice from the deep beyond talking, and her voice goes and melds with this deeper voice that says all these sinister things. And then Ava, her submersible is gone because you hear her scream, and then she's gone. And then he's alone, and his Iron Lung starts picking up the motion tracker of something coming closer. And so he turns and runs away from it. And all of this, I was like, yes, this is cool, because you don't even have, it's a kind of that Jaws thing of visually cheating, in that you have something to indicate the menace that is after you, but you don't actually actively have to show it, which I think is so cool. Now, things here have taken a bit of a turn because there's a section here that I've kind of glossed over, which I think was really cool, in that his submersible is now leaking with the blood from this blood ocean, and it's touching his skin, and it's, I want to say, corrosive, or it's doing something to mutate him, and that I thought was really cool. Like, genuinely, when he's pulling off his bandages that he's put around his arms because he's been bashed around a little bit, and it's starting to bring up the skin with him, I'm like, oh, that is messed up. That is really cool. But again, the problem is it took so long to get here. I think this movie would have been really good at a quick 120. If you really wanted to pull in some of the story and all that, I feel an hour and 20 minutes, you could have gotten a really cohesive picture out of this that would have done what it set out to do. At 2 hours, there is just too much downtime and not enough build back up. It kind of just hops to it. It's not a build up, it's just a, we're here, and then boom, we're here. But anyways, so he's being pursued by this creature that's still talking to him, still talking about the significance. Blood's still pouring in, it's still affecting him, and his arm or his hand gets stuck to it. He tries to rip his other hand free. His other hand gets stuck to it. He's able to finally get his hand free, but like the skin comes with it. And then he tries to pull his other arm free and it rips right off. Again, really cool. Some body horror stuff, really interesting. And then something, you see the teeth bite down into the submersible, still threatening him. And he essentially implodes the thing, and it destroys. You get a brief glimpse of the creature, which, okay, so you get a brief look at the creature. It goes outside of the submersible, and it shows it, and it kind of gets blown up. The effect is all right. Like it's a little masked, which I think is good because it does have that little bit of a low budget feel, but because it's like all red and you get the sinister eyes and everything, it does look fine. Like it's not a bad effect. It's just, if you took away some of the elements from it, you would notice it's a cheaper effect. But I think it did its job fine. And then very end, you see the black box that he had retrieved from within the iron lung float up onto the surface. Now, all of that leading up to the end, it got me on board with the film, but I thought of how long it took to get there, and like I said, I think an hour and 20 minutes, this film could have been a lot better. I think honestly that one, it feels like a lot of movies nowadays, and this is why I go back to the beginning of the film, are so afraid of quiet moments, of just letting silence sink in. And I can give a couple examples here for Iron Lung. The beginning, there's a whole narration sequence, which I talked about, but I think, like I said, if it was just showing it, loading it into this ocean, the blood coming around it, it's sinking deeper into it, and then just seeing inside, it's quiet, there's nothing. I think that would have been more atmospheric and effective. I think when you constantly need narration or somebody to monologue, it kind of ruins the tension in the moment sometimes. Especially when the monologuing is just constantly saying fuck, or like, oh, fucking shit, oh god damn it, like stuff like that. Like it's realistic to some extent, but I do think some of it is just in the enjoyment of like the stress of the moment. The characters, like Simon, I think would be like so afraid to fuck up. Like you're holding your breath, you're just waiting, you're letting it go. And then that first time you hear a voice, it almost startles you because it's been so silent for so long. I think that works more. I think that would work to the movie's strengths. I think some movies nowadays are just so afraid to give the movie a moment to breathe. And going to Markiplier's performance, like I said, I don't think it was bad. I think there were moments where it kind of just was uneven, and I think if he was doing this project with a director who could pull out the performance, who was in there to also maybe help with the editing and some of this stuff, I think it would have been much more effective. Because he had some quality actors in there, like Troy Baker. I heard his voice in there, and he's got a good background in acting well. Let me see. I wrote some notes here. There was some questionable ADR that I noticed, where it was just something that I was kind of like, you could have just left it alone and had some quietness. Some genuinely claustrophobic scenes, but no stakes. I already talked about that. Mapping section could have used some cuts. Yeah. One of the things I said here, and I think it needs to be said, even with all these criticisms, I think they're valid. I think anybody criticizing a film is valid. But I also think that with this specific project, you also have to kind of take into account what it is. It is a passion project from somebody who genuinely loved the property and wanted to see something done with it. He put his own money on the line. I think he might have, maybe he also got some financing, but I don't think so. I think it was all his passion project. He brought in actors from games he enjoyed. Like, Markiplier has such a love for gaming and all of this that I cannot sit here and tell you the movie was shit, because it wasn't. It wasn't shit. It was all right. I think within that all right film could be a really good film. That's where I'm kind of coming from. I think, and I said this about Silent Hill, Return to Silent Hill, movies obsessed with giving flashbacks for characters. I don't necessarily need to see that. I don't even need to know, like, you don't need a monologue and go into great detail about this. You can show me regret through the actions. You don't need to spell it out. You could have some flashback scenes where he's trying to avert the disaster that led to it. There was quick flashes of scenes, but I think it would have been really cool within this environment to just have it be he comes across a bomb and he's like trying to defuse it and everything. I think some of that stuff would have been really cool. But I can't hate on this film. And I think that's one of the things that makes me pull back a little bit on the criticism, because, like, for me, Hollywood films, Return to Silent Hill is a perfect example. If you show no respect for the project, like I said, the first Silent Hill film I could kind of get on board with, even if I don't agree with the fact that the lying figures were in there, and I didn't agree with Pyramid Head being in there, and I didn't agree with him changing Harry to Rose because of some weird thing that he said about, Harry showed feminine characteristics in the game, which, I'm sorry, chasing after your daughter is feminine to make sure she doesn't die in a demon-infested town? Okay. But when Hollywood shows no respect to the gaming franchises, and they have so much money that they throw at it, and they throw all these, like, addendums that they want in this thing, like, I have no problem shitting on it, because it went from being a passion project from a director to making, studio mandated cuts or changes or what have you, and it just makes for a weak product. Here, it is a passion project, and it's very clear that it is a passion project, and it is very clear that he went into it with this idea of what he wanted to do. I just think he needed somebody in there to help with the editing, to cut out the stuff that didn't necessarily add to the film. And that's it. Honestly, for me, I'd say that this film, the parts, I think if you were to cut it to the parts that I really did quite enjoy, I'd give it a 6.57 out of 10. I think 7 or so out of 10 is generous because I think the stuff that it did do that really made me interested in the film, if they had done more of that, I think this would be like one of my favorite films because I love that kind of Lovecraftian fucked up shit. But because there was so little of it, I think it brings it down. And that's why I say 7 out of 10. But then when you take it within context of the full film, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. And my 6 out of 10, I would say, is like generous in the sense that I don't think it's a bad film. I don't think it's a horrible film. I think it's a film you should go check. Just specifically go to a theater to support this guy who genuinely has a care for this game franchise and who I think could bring his own style of taking the properties he loves and doing an indie film on these things and getting a license to do these things before Hollywood ruins board game franchises. I think that'd be really cool. I just think that whatever he does next, I hope that he does not try and because again, trying to direct the film, trying to write the film, and then trying to star in the film, that is just a lot. And that could lead you to so much burnout that you don't even realize until it's done. But I have great respect for the fact that he did it. But, like I said, I think whatever he does next, recognizing those limitations, and, if he's directing the film, maybe just have a cameo. Just do a cameo of yourself. If you want to act as the main lead character, get somebody else to direct it. I think you can still write the film. I think you can still be involved with the film and, act and write it. But I think directing on top of acting, unless you have done it for years, Kurt Russell or Clint Eastwood or somebody like this, where they know all of this stuff and they can also bring out the performance in themselves because they've done it for years, I think you're hurting your own project in the end, trying to take on too much, especially for your first project, especially for something that I think, they worked within small confines, and I think that was brilliant, but it was still ambitious. But anyways, that was about 30 minutes of me yammering on, so I feel like that's enough. Again, I didn't walk away from this feeling angry. I genuinely was just like, you know what? I'm happy I contributed to this film. I'm angry that I contributed to fucking Return to Silent Hill. But anyways, if you enjoyed the review, maybe like, comment, or subscribe. No obligations, but it does help me combat YouTube's algorithm. And honestly, it lets me know that you want to see more of this. It's something new for me. I'm doing this all off the cuff. I have some notes here with me, but I really didn't look at them. I was just kind of going off the cuff. But anyways, my name is Shane, and I will see you next time.